Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to do a no-nonsense video in self-help, development work, life coaching, even spirituality. And this video is going to be on, at some point you got to do it, right? At some point you really do got to do it. Because it doesn't matter like how great of a tool collector you are if you never use the tools. Basically what you become is just a tool collector. You become like an archivist of the tools instead of actually using the tools to improve your life. And you do this because you want to keep working, but you can't bring yourself to start something that requires a certain kind of adversity. And those of you guys who have done like week-long retreats, you're kind of helped to sort of get up underneath this kind of adversity. That's the good thing about like a week-long retreat. You go away, your daily routine is totally changed. You're not able to access all the goodies that you're able to access when you're at home, right? Like your internet, your ice cream, your whatever, You're not able to talk and, interact with Facebook. You're not able to talk to people, loved ones and so on, or snoop and see what somebody else is doing online. You're not able to do any of that when you're on a solo retreat, solo meditation retreat. And so one of the benefits of a solo meditation retreat is not only does it help you focus on things that you want to be able to do, but it also like dramatically breaks you out of your comfort zone and out of your relationships that you're in. And this is the essence of the problem. This is why we become tool collectors instead of tool users, is this issue of addiction. And addiction is a lot deeper than people make it seem. Addiction is a relative term. And it goes to, there's a leg in it that like, if it's what you want to do, you got to respect that. But then there's a part of you that also wants to do something different too, right? There's a part of you that wants to make a change or like shift a chapter. But you haven't been ready to do that yet, right? So the question becomes like, how come I'm not ready to make that shift from some kind of limbo state that you're in? Or maybe you're ending a chapter, like it's winding down. You want to avoid the limbo state and you want to jump right back into a new chapter, right? That kind of reminds me of, people who do the rebound relationship. They try to avoid that limbo state. But yeah, when you end a chapter, then oftentimes you do need to kind of go away and think about what the next chapter is going to be. And maybe that will become obvious to your circumstances. But then the next thing is starting the chapter. There's so many like ridiculously small false starts that don't even constitute a start. And what I want to sort of focus this video on is, why can't you start that new chapter that you're already teed up to do? And how do you do this? Well, see, what nobody wants to tell you is that you got to break up with some addictions. because those things are only addictions. Because when it comes to the new chapter that you want to move into, those things are either distractions or they're seen as expensive or harmful or no good, right? Because the new chapter that you want to start is going in a totally different direction. So this might happen to you, like if your last chapter was spirituality and your next chapter is like starting a business. You're going to have to break up with some of those things that you did with the spirituality to move into that new chapter of starting a business. Now, this is what I want to say. This right here, I'm going to point out a trap. The trap is, no, we don't have to break up with anything. We can continue doing everything exactly what we did before when we move into a new chapter. See, that's the sneaky mind, the sneaky, lazy mind that doesn't want to go through the pain of having to break up some of these relations to move from one chapter to the next. But the thing is that you need all of your energy all of the time. Can you imagine if you were trying to do spirituality while you were building your business? Right? It's like, that's not the optimal way to do something. The optimal way to do something is to focus on that one thing with all of your energy, right? So this is why some people they break up with certain things. They may even break up with you, right? Because they want to pursue some other pathway in their life, some new chapter. And so this concept of addiction, what addiction means is that when you go from one chapter to another chapter, it's like going from one spiral stage to another spiral stage. You got to shed a skin. But the only person who can shed a skin is you, because all of those things that you've been doing seem normal to you. So for example, if you're doing spirituality, you may be tripping balls, on psychedelics and, just out of it most of the time. That's like the inverse personality that you need to actually start a business. Right. I mean, to start a business, you need to be ridiculously sober and kind of focused on the material world, not focused on some, crazy shit that's happening in your mind. But these are fine, but notice that they're different chapters. So when you just maybe you went through a religious phase, or you went through a weightlifting phase or something like that, where you were really working on your body, and then you went through a spiritual phase, and then you went through a musician phase. I mean, life is about chapters, different chapters. And I think what nobody wants to tell you is that everybody wants to make it seem like, well, you don't have to change. You can do everything all the time. But then, when you look back at your own experience, you realize, I realize this has not been true for me at all. Yes, I was able to come up with a lot of small steps, a lot of tools, which I can now use in a new chapter. But there's a difference between having a bag of tools and going out and hunting for that thing. Think about the energy that you spent doing that with spiritual enlightenment, or doing that with whatever it is that you've been interested in. You went at that full bore, right? And you loved every minute of it. But in order to be able to do that, you had to sever relationships with a lot of things to be able to go into that chapter. And you had to do it for a long time. I spent 10 years, at least 10 years, working on spirituality. And it was well worth it. It was that's a deep dive. That's a deep chapter, right? But But, for me, I need to move into I need to become more well-rounded. So I need to work on my health, my finances, some boundary issues that I have, things like that. My heart a little bit more, like I need to like be a little bit more like open my heart a little bit more too. And so there's some things that I want to work on kind of more in the human realm now. And a lot of those things now, they look like addictions to me. But see, addictions are relative. Like, they didn't look like addictions to me 5 years ago. So it depends on where you are. It depends on like whether you're at the beginning of a chapter, the middle of a chapter, the end of a chapter, kind of in the limbo state in between chapters in your life. But once you know what your next chapter has to be or is, then the issue is that how do you get started and what's involved in getting started? And so this issue of like addiction and distraction comes up, right? Well, you got to get rid of the addictions and the distractions. These are the things that you need to learn how to say no to. But these are like little breakups, man, actually, in your life. Things that you love, that you have to break up with. And I think the key is don't hate these things. Don't hate the person that you were when you did these things. Realize that had to be that way for that chapter to be what it was. And you can do other things without pushing those things into your shadow. Don't create hatreds, right? Don't hate things that you found solace in, and that you loved, right? But also recognize intellectually why those things can't be in the next chapter, right? See, that's I think that's the healthy way of thinking about addiction. That's the healthy way of thinking about addictions and distractions, is seeing them as relative, as being chapter dependent, and also realizing that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, you can't just be way open and be really great at running a business. I'm sorry, right? I mean, when you're doing your spiritual enlightenment work, you can be way open, even into crazy town, cray land. But, when you come back down to earth and you're focusing on finances and health, it's material, right? It's having your head screwed on tight. It's being focused on strategically advancing objectives and lots of focused action. So those are different movies, actually, and they don't need to be playing at the same time. That would actually be very discombobulating if those two movies were playing at the same time. So again, what nobody wants to tell you is that you got to go through this breakup process when you go from one chapter to another. Otherwise, what happens is you just keep stalling. It's like you're in a bad relationship, right? But you don't want to break up. So you just keep stalling in that bad relationship. You're not really doing the previous chapter. You're not doing the new chapter. You're not even really in a limbo state. You're in you're standing at the starting line and you're like, at some point, I'm going to go, right? And you're standing at the starting line. At some point, I'm going to go. At some point, I'm going to go. But you never go, right? You're just standing at the starting line. So in a way, you're at the start phase. But you're not going anywhere. Because nobody ever told you got to do one more thing before you can start. You got to figure out things to let go of. Not permanently, not entirely, but from a day-to-day, yes. Because in order for you to to start this new chapter in your life, your mentality, your mind and your body needs to be aligned with putting all of your energy and effort into this new chapter. So, that's basically why we identify addictions and distractions, is because we think that for us to enter into this new chapter that we want to enter into, these things are the inverse of what we want to be doing. All right, and so what I'm going to do, friends, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and we'll do the second half of this video. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So let's talk a little bit about the role of daily routine. See, what people are not really acknowledging is that when you first move into a chapter, you feel like you need to do a lot of training, because you're trying to reprogram yourself to the hero's journey of that new chapter. And this is where people talk a lot about daily routine. But if you look at your last chapter that you were in, did you really need a daily routine at the peak phase of that chapter? No, right? You just did it. You were so good at that when you were at the peak phase of the last chapter of your life. You just got to the point where it was like, you just did it. You didn't need a daily routine. So a daily routine is a start phase tool. A daily routine is all about, you see, when you're coming out of a limbo stage and you're moving into a new stage or a new chapter. You're coming out of a limbo phase and you're moving into a new chapter. You're a rookie, basically, in that chapter. Like you're a novice. You're the fool. So you went from being like a super expert in your last chapter to where in your new chapter, now you're a fool because you're in something that you weren't in before. Think about people who had a baby, right? Like a couple who had a baby. Or think of two teenagers falling in love with each other. That's a chapter. A couple having a baby, that's a chapter. Somebody moving out of their parents' house for the first time. That's a chapter. Going to college, right? Moving into the dorms at college. That's a chapter. But every time getting your driver's license and being able to drive a car, right? That's a chapter. I'm sure when you got your driver's license, just like I did, you wanted to drive everywhere, right? Anytime anybody wanted to go somewhere, it's like, I'll drive. Now you're just like, dude, don't ask me to drive. Right? It's so funny how that works, because you went from being a novice to being an expert at that thing. It's like when you first get into anything, let's say it's spirituality, you're full of spiritual lingo and terminology, and you're just loving it, right? You're just loving it. It's like brand new to you. It's like a child playing, or a dog playing with a new chew toy or something like that. But then you get to the point where you're like old on the path, where you're like, oh, don't ask me about spiritual enlightenment, please. Right? Just don't. You become like the grumpy old man or the grumpy old woman almost, because you're like in the end stage of that chapter, or maybe you're in the limbo stage and you haven't identified like a new start stage for yourself yet. And so you're bored. You don't realize that, like, I need to move out of spirituality to move into something else. You're constantly trying to drag the spirituality behind you Like it has to be there for some reason. Like, I can't live if I don't have all my spiritual enlightenment nonsense in the boat behind me that I'm dragging behind me. It's like a homeless person dragging a big ass bag of a bunch of shit, and he can't even walk because he's like, "Argh." And he's like moving like a millimeter at a time. You know, it's just like, nah, dude, you got to ditch that fucking thing. Or you got to like take some shit out of that bag, put it in a smaller backpack or something like that, and then leave the rest, right? So I think this issue of going from the end of a chapter through a limbo state to the start of a new chapter is something that life coaches don't really emphasize enough. And why it's very painful actually to go from a former chapter to a new chapter, because it's something brand new. Something brand new. Like imagine like you went on some kind of meditation retreat. You didn't have any of your stuff. Imagine you went to India. They took you to India. They took you in by helicopter. They dropped you down into some kind of a plantation. They put you in a fucking loincloth and put you in a hut and said, you got to live in this hut for like 3 months. And we'll bring you food and water, but you got to sit in this hut, you know, for 3 months. You can walk around. You can walk around the grounds, you know, but you have no internet. You have no phone. You have no writing utensils even. I mean, that's going to break all of your addictions that you had, you know, in, you know, wherever you came from. But it's not doing it from like a chapter focus. It's doing it at like a more fundamental focus, which is why it has a lot of spiritual juice to it too, because, you know, you have to face yourself when you do that with nothing. It's like, that's like facing yourself without any clothing on, right? Because all that falls away. You realize how all that stupid shit that you read about on the internet, all like you're going to Starbucks and seeing all the normal shit that you see, how all of that ultimately is a kind of illusion, right? And what you're stuck with is you're stuck with yourself as consciousness. And that's why, you know, a meditation retreat like that could be very useful for spirituality. But like I said, I think it can also be very useful too for starting a new chapter, because you're going to have to do something like that when you start the new chapter. It's not going to be as intense, but it's going to be like, okay, so now I went from being single to being in a relationship. Or now I went from being in a relationship to having a kid. Or now maybe you're going through a divorce, right? Now I went from being in a relationship to being single again. Or maybe I went from being in school to being out of school. Or maybe I went from, you know, being employed in a certain profession to starting my own business. I mean, whatever it is, you're going to go through the same issue of there has to be a crack as much as there is a link between chapters. Otherwise, it wouldn't be different chapters, right? There wouldn't be different chapters if there wasn't some kind of real deep difference, right, between one chapter and another. So, for example, let's say that you're really, really good at spirituality, and that's all you do is spirituality. Well, unless that's your business, that's probably not the way that you're gonna make money, unless you're begging for money, and a lot of people do, like Buddhist monks and so on. You know, they go out and they try to sell little trinkets or beg for money or something like that. Maybe you're fortunate enough to be able to get paid by YouTube if you have a YouTube channel or something along those kinds of lines. Then you're making money doing spirituality. But really, spirituality is for you, right? It's for you. It's like for your own self. And, you know, whereas making money That's for you, but that's also for other people too. That's for the people who have a relationship with you that you're helping, and also so they're not worried about you, right? So it's like everybody who knows you wants you to be doing well, right? Like, and it's every person's responsibility to kind of like be doing well themselves. And so, we have to go out into the world and we have to make money. We have to work on our physical health. We have to work on our mental health. We have to work on having some people who care about us, having some relationships out in the world that we tend to. Meeting people in real life. So, getting away from the internet, right? Spending so much time on the internet. Now, see, all of that stuff, all that solo stuff, internet stuff, all that stuff was very useful when you're doing spirituality, because really you're going into yourself, right? So it doesn't matter so much that you're interacting with somebody online. But if you're trying to have a relationship with somebody online, like say you're trying to have like a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship online or over the phone or something like that, it's just, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm saying it's that's hard, right? Like ultimately you would think that you would want to do like a new chapter where you have this relationship with this person in real life, right? See that, but you're clinging to the online stuff. But see, that's an example where like when you go from one chapter to the next, that addiction should have been cut off, right? Because that's not really the best way to proceed with that chapter if you're going out and trying to have a relationship with somebody, right? Like a partner or something like that in real life. Or like hanging out with friends. Like how much more exciting is it to go and hang out with people in person than hang out with somebody on the phone or online? It's night and day, right? Like take traveling, like traveling with the person, like all those shared experiences that you have. So it just depends on what it is that you're doing. So addiction and distraction are relative. It just depends on what it is that you want to be doing. But I think that the issue is like, how should I treat my addictions? And this is where I'm going to get real. Be careful about what you decide are addictions. Don't harshly cut them off. Love them, but you gotta say goodbye to them tentatively. Like, thank you very much for being a part of my last chapter, a part of my life. I love you, but what I gotta do in this next part of my life, this next chapter of my life, I can't have this be a part of it, unfortunately. It's like breaking up with somebody where you're like, it's not you, it's me. You know what I mean? It's not you, it's me. Why? Because I want to move into a new chapter and you're like stopping me from moving into that new chapter, right? Whether that's a perceived block or not. It's the same kind of dealio. Okay, friends? So I'm going to be working a lot on integrating, a lot of my earlier videos, which is the stuff on action and habits and accountability. I actually started a new Discord server. So you can see that in the About Me on my YouTube channel. It's just going to be about accountability. So if you're interested in that, there's nobody in there but me because it's brand new. But if you're interested in that, go ahead and join that. And, we can do some accountability partner stuff. If not, I'm just going to be doing it myself. But this is the new chapter that I'm moving into. Thanks, friends. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.